I was kneeling on the bare kitchen floor of a house that had nothing left in it, setting a folder down in the exact spot he would see first when he walked through that door. Every bulb in the place was already gone, unscrewed one at a time and wrapped in newspaper, so the rooms behind me held nothing but gray afternoon light and dust. The refrigerator was out, so there was no hum coming through the wall. The clock was boxed, so there was no tick in the hallway. I stood up slowly, turned my phone all the way off, and locked the door behind me. My husband was 3 states away while I did it, sitting on a beach, on the exact trip he had booked for me and for the daughter I was 7 months into carrying. He had not taken me on it, and I want to be precise about that, because precision was the only weapon I ever picked up. He took her. My name is Bridget Halstead. I am 33. I teach civics and American government at a public high school, and I coach the mock trial team. Being pregnant never made me weak. It only made me methodical. There is one rule I make my students repeat back to me until they can say it in their sleep, and it is that testimony without evidence is only noise. So when my own marriage turned into a case, I did not scream at him, and I did not throw a single plate across that kitchen. I never gave him one sentence he could quote back to me later in a room with a lawyer sitting in it. Instead, I opened a notebook, and then I opened a second one, and I kept them both behind the pregnancy books on my nightstand where he never once reached. Stay with me to the end, because he does come home. The last thing he said to me before he left was water the plant on the porch. Don't wait up. Get your rest. He came back to a dark house, an echo in the hallway, and a folder with his own signature inside it. He came back to nothing, and every page of that nothing had been signed by his own hand. I never once raised my voice. I only had to be patient, and I had 3 months to get very good at it. 3 months before that kitchen floor, I drove to my husband's office with a fresh ultrasound photo in my bag, because he had missed the appointment that morning over a call he swore he couldn't get out of. Grant Halstead sold commercial flooring and ran a whole region of it, and he had spent 6 years teaching me that his phone ringing was a fact of nature and not a choice. The blinds on his door were open about an inch, which is the only reason any of this happened. I saw him before I ever reached the handle. He had his hand on the back of a woman's neck, and she had her forehead against his chest. And neither one of them moved for a long time. Nobody holds anybody like that by accident. I did not knock. I did not say his name. And I did not let go of the photo in my hand. I turned around, walked back to my car, and sat there for 11 minutes. I sat long enough to memorize her face when she finally came out, laughing at something on her phone, spinning her keys around one finger. Then I walked back into that building like I belonged there. Past the front desk, past the sample racks, straight down the aisle of cubicles. I read the nameplate on the divider wall. Sidney Kearns. Internal quoting. Hired less than a year ago. I went home, and I made the pork chops he liked. And I set the table for 2. When he came in, he asked what smelled so good and told me his afternoon had been nothing but meetings. Dead, boring. And then he kissed my forehead. I refilled his water glass and asked him more about those boring meetings. And he answered every question without blinking once. That was the night I learned something about myself that I had not known at breakfast. I could sit across from a lie and eat dinner with it and pass it the salt. I did not cry. And I did not sleep much either. I lay in the dark next to a man who had just described an entire afternoon that never happened. And I started counting all the things I did not know yet. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney in Washtenaw County named Adele Bracken. And when her assistant offered me the office, I asked for anywhere else. A calendar entry is a record, and a record is a trail. She met me at a coffee shop off Washtenaw Avenue instead. Past 50. Gray streak in her hair. A legal pad already open before I got my coat off. She did not ask how I was feeling. She said, start with the money. So I did. I told her the house was paid off 2 years ago and titled to both of us, and that Grant handled the joint accounts while I had not looked closely in over a year. I told her he came home after midnight, 3 nights a week, and the excuses had stopped even trying to be good. She wrote fast and never blinked, and her pen only stopped when I said the name Sydney Kearns. "Office affair," she said. "Common as dirt. And easy to prove if you have the patience for it." I told her I did not want to confront him. Not yet. And she looked at me over her glasses. "Good," she said. "Confrontation is for people who don't intend to win. Evidence beats accusation every time. And right now you have neither. So go home and start building one." I laughed out loud at that, because I have been saying a version of it to 16-year-olds for 9 years. I teach civics, and I coach mock trial. And every fall I make a room full of kids, repeat it back until they are sick of hearing it. Testimony without evidence is noise, and a date is what turns it into a document. I had been grading teenagers on that principle since before I ever met my husband. I had never once applied it to my own kitchen table. That afternoon, I bought a plain composition notebook at a drugstore for $2. Wrote the date on the first line. And under it, I put down what I saw through the gap in those blinds and how long I sat in that lot afterward. Then I slid it behind the pregnancy books on my nightstand, the ones he walked past every night and had never opened. Not once. Not even the week we found out. Here is the thing nobody warns you about. Once a man decides you are not paying attention, he does not get more careful. He gets worse. Grant stopped asking about my appointments completely. And when I came home with new ultrasound images, he looked at them for 2 seconds before going back to his phone. When my doctor told me to rest more in the 3rd trimester, he laughed and asked where exactly I thought I was going. "You're 7 months pregnant," he said. "It's not like you're training for anything." He came home one night smelling like perfume that was not mine, and when I asked, he told me the air conditioning had failed and the whole office got crammed into one conference room. I said nothing. I went upstairs and wrote the date in the notebook behind the pregnancy books. Then he threw a poker night for his coworkers without asking me. And I found out when 6 men showed up at my door with a cooler while I was standing there in sweatpants. He waved at me from the couch and asked if I could grab everybody some snacks whenever I got a chance. I did not grab anybody snacks. I went upstairs and shut the bedroom door. In the morning, there were bottles all over the coffee table, chips ground into the rug, and a burn mark in the finish of the side table where somebody had set down a cigarette. Grant left for work without touching any of it. I photographed every bit of it before I cleaned it up, and I am not sure I can explain how calm my hands were. 2 nights later, he came home wearing a watch I had never seen. Expensive. The kind of thing he would never buy without a reason. "Work bonus," he said, "for closing the account in Toledo." That night, while he was in the shower, I pulled up the statements, and there was no bonus deposit anywhere. What there was, instead, was a withdrawal out of the account we had opened for the nursery furniture. He had bought that watch with our daughter's crib. 3 days after that, I was standing at the kitchen sink when I heard him laughing out on the porch. Low. The way you laugh when you think nobody is home. "She's fine," he was saying. "She doesn't suspect a thing. Trust me." I closed the screen door quietly and went back to unloading the dishwasher, like I had heard nothing at all. And then I dried my hands. And I went upstairs. And I wrote down the time. 2 weeks later, he came home pleased with himself and told me he had booked us a baby moon. A real one. A resort down on the Gulf before everything got loud and sleepless. He held his phone up so I could see the confirmation. Both our names on it. And he said I deserved this. I thanked him. I even smiled. And I hated how easy it still was. Then I went upstairs and wrote the dates in the notebook. Because by then everything went in the notebook. 4 days before we were supposed to leave. He told me the company needed him at a trade show out east that same week, and that we would have to push the trip. Maybe cancel it altogether. Maybe I could still go by myself, he offered, if I really wanted to. I asked him where the show was. He said out east. Distracted, already reaching for his keys. I asked which state, and he kissed my forehead and walked out the door without answering me. That afternoon, I found the real itinerary. Same resort. Same 3 days. 2 seats. And the second name on it was the name I had already read off a cubicle divider. Sydney Kearns. He was taking her on the trip he had booked for his pregnant wife, and he was going to send me a picture of the pool from it. I sat at that kitchen table for 20 minutes without moving. But that is not what stopped my heart. In the file rack he kept by the couch, right on top, was the expense report he had already filled out for that same trip, coded as a client entertainment event, signed at the bottom in his own handwriting. He was not just taking her. He was billing his employer for it. I photographed every page and put it back exactly where I found it, corner for corner, because that piece of paper was not mine to use. Adele did not react the way I expected when I called her. That isn't bad news, she said. That's your window. 3 days. Confirmed. With him 3 states away, and no way to check on the house. As for the expense report, she said, you do nothing with it. Because it is not your problem. It is his human resources department's problem. And they will find it on their own schedule. So for 3 nights, after Grant fell asleep, I walked the house with my phone in my hand. I photographed every piece of furniture, every serial number, every receipt, and I matched it against the statements Adele had already flagged. Row by row, I built the inventory, and every line I added made my stomach turn a little harder, because every line was proof that I had been living inside a case file for months and calling it a marriage. He left before sunrise, told me not to wait on his calls because the reception out there was terrible, and reminded me to water the plant on the porch. I stood at the window until his taillights turned the corner. Then I called Adele. She had already said the part I needed to hear. Twice. In writing. The house is titled to both of you, so you have every right to remove your own property from a home you co-own. And every item on your inventory has been photographed and matched to ownership records for 2 weeks. This is not theft, she said. This is a division of property that happens on your calendar instead of his. Tammy Sowers pulled into my driveway at 6 in the morning with a truck the size of a small building and 8 people already pulling on gloves. She ran a 2-truck outfit. Cash up front. No confirmation emails floating around with my husband's name on them. Bedroom first, she said, because bedrooms always take longest. Then the living room. Then the kitchen. The nursery goes last. Because you told me you wanted to do that one yourself. I did. I folded every little sleeper by hand. I wrapped the crib mobile in bubble paper like it was made of glass. I packed away the ultrasound photos, the ones he had looked at for 2 seconds before going back to his phone, into a keepsake box the size of a shoebox. By early afternoon, the house had started to sound different. Hollow. The way a place sounds when your footsteps come back to you. Then Tammy stopped in the doorway, with a box under one arm, and asked me a question I had not thought of. Do you want to leave them any light? Some clients like the place completely dark, she said. It says more than words do. I told her to take every bulb, every room, every fixture. So they went through that house, unscrewing bulbs one at a time and wrapping them in newspaper. And the last one came out of the kitchen ceiling at 4:45. I did not feel triumphant. I felt quiet, which was a thing I had not felt in months. When the truck pulled out, I stayed behind alone. I walked through rooms that had nothing in them and listened to my own breathing come back off the walls. Then I knelt down on the bare kitchen floor and set the folder in the exact spot he would see first. The sound of that cardboard hitting the tile was the only sound in the entire house. He called me at 20 to 1, and his voice had gone thin in a way I had never heard in 6 years. Bridget, where is everything? Where is the furniture? Were we robbed? Did you call the police? I told him nobody robbed him, and that there was a folder on the kitchen floor, and he should turn on his phone flashlight and start at page 1. He asked why he would need a flashlight in the middle of the afternoon, and then he went quiet, because he had just tried a light switch. Every bulb in that house was in a box 2 towns away. Then he started shouting that the house was half his and I had no right. And I let him finish. Every item that left is photographed and matched against ownership records, I said. And my attorney will walk you through all of it. How long? He kept saying. How long have you been planning this? About as long as you and Sydney, I said. And I hung up. He called back 11 times. The police came out that evening and looked at an inventory with dates and photographs on every line. And they did not write a theft report. His company found the rest of it without any help from me. Sydney Kearns had figured out that an expense report coded as client entertainment would bury whoever touched it last. So she filed it on schedule. Not out of conscience. I promise you. She filed it because if it surfaced later, she was the one losing a job, not him. A resort folio with 2 names on it landed in front of a controller who compared it to a trade show that never happened. They fired him for expense fraud, not for cheating. And I think that is the part that actually broke him. He could argue with me about a marriage, but he could not argue with his own signature. His commission got clawed back that same week. And when he posted something long and wounded about his enemies online, Joanne Prine left one short comment under it and the post was gone in 3 hours. Then he made the mistake that finished him. At 34 weeks pregnant, I opened an envelope telling me my health coverage had been terminated at his request. I read the effective date twice. I did not beg anyone for anything. Adele filed that same morning. A Washtenaw County judge ordered it restored before the week was out. The mediation room had gray carpet, a long table, and 2 pitchers of water nobody touched. Adele slid the expense report across first, the one with his own signature at the bottom, then the resort folio with 2 names on it for the exact days that were supposed to be mine. Last came a calendar with 7 missed prenatal appointments marked in red and a column listing the reasons he had given me for each one. Grant said it was a smear job. The mediator asked him if he disputed any of the documents, and he looked down at the table and said no. When we got to custody, he came halfway out of his chair and asked if I had any idea what it felt like to walk into a house and find nothing left. I know exactly what that feels like, I said. I felt it standing outside your office with an ultrasound photo in my hand. The room went quiet enough that I could hear his attorney stop writing. He sat back down and signed every line slowly, like he was waiting for something to stop him, and nothing did. Here is where everybody landed. Grant lost the job, lost the commission, got supervised visitation, and showed up late to 2 of his first 3 visits before he moved a state over to sell flooring for a big box chain. Sydney Kearns quit before they could fire her and left Michigan with none of the future she had traded her whole life for. And she texted me exactly once, and I never answered it. Wes Prine lost his friend and then lost his wife, because Joanne filed the month after that comment came down. Adele closed the file and told me at the door that I had already done the hard part. Tammy Sowers sent flowers when my daughter was born. No card, just flowers. I had her in the rented house on the west side of Ypsilanti, the one leased under my maiden name, and I hung that same crib mobile in a room that belonged to nobody but us. That first winter, I put up a small tree in the living room and hung my grandmother's ornament on it. A year before, I had stood in a room like that one and listened to my own footsteps come back at me. This time the room was full. I'm not going to pretend I planned the piece. I only planned the paperwork. But I get a kitchen now where the only dishes in the sink are mine, and mornings where nobody needs an explanation from me. If something ever gave you your quiet back, I'd love to hear what it was.